Hello and welcome to the Happiness Is podcast with me, your host, Bruce Aitchison from Happiness Is Egg-Shaped, and I am smiling like a small child because I am so excited for today's guest. I feel like I know him, and we've never met until just a few minutes ago when he dialed in. Social media does that to you. You feel like you know them, you feel like you're connected, and actually you've never been in the same space. But he is a man with huge enthusiasm for the game. It's infectious. I love to see what he gets up to. I love his positivity, and he is all over it. He's also in a great part of the world where the game is only going to get bigger if it hasn't already exploded. So let's waste no more time and bring in the one and the only, the incredibly handsome Dallen Stanford.
Hello, Thanks so much, Bruce. Great to be here, pal.
I love it. I'm so happy. And as we were just saying, although you can't tell, you're actually 9 days older than me.
Exactly. It must be because you shaved your hair yesterday, and that's why it looks so sleek and clean.
In Scotland, we have a saying that you must have had an easy paper round. So it
explain that.
When I was a kid, I had a paper round delivering newspapers, but it was all uphill and it was hard work and it was in the wind and the rain. You had an easier distribution route, shall we say?
I love that saying. I'm going to use that. That's brilliant.
Yeah, I had a tough paper round when I was a lad.
Moved out during the pandemic. She has family just across the border in Massachusetts, so we're there for a little while. But before that, lived in Los Angeles for about 15 years. And then we're in Austin, Texas for 4 years. My wife went to grad school there. But been in America since about 2003, came on a holiday and still enjoying it.
It came on a holiday. So was a rugby ball involved in that holiday, or was it genuinely to have sun, sea and sand?
You're so right. It was absolutely rugby. I'd finished university in Cape Town, South Africa, and a friend of mine was living in Los Angeles, and there was a South African rugby coach that was coaching a team called the Occidental Old Boys, and they were like a Division II side. And he said, listen, I need a few extra players and, would you want to come across? And so, I came across in 2003 for a 6-month visa and enjoyed it so much they got me to come back for another 2-year stint. And in that 2-year stint, I met my current wife.
Fell in love and the rest is history.
Yes, exactly. Funny how life changes so quickly, right?
Yeah. And South Africans, I mean, you guys are like water. You get into every rugby crack on the planet. You have suitcase and boots and will travel. What was it that drew you to America? Was it just easy because you got a call?
Well, so I when I finished high school, there was a program with a lot of schools in South Africa at the time to spend a gap year in the UK. And so I had people that did it at my school in Rondebosch in Cape Town. And so I was like, I would love to do that in between, high school and college. That was a perfect opportunity to spend a whole year. So I went to the southwest of England. I was in Devon, had a wonderful time at a high school. I was coaching sport, working in the boarding house and things like that. So I kind of felt like this was a perfect opportunity to explore the world and then travel Europe, right? So I did that. When I came back and went to university, all my friends had failed. So I was in the same year as them. So I was like, okay, well, I'd like to do this after university too, spend a year somewhere and then start, getting into the working world. And so that year was America. And in the end, enjoyed it so much. And the opportunities were there. That's the thing, as you said about rugby boots. Having your boots compared to playing any other American sport, it gives you access to the world and friends and, connections and jobs. And so straight away from the get-go, they sorted me out and I had 30 new rugby friends. And then I had a new wife.
just as an aside, I had friends and a wife. And I've been able to use rugby. I've got no caps, I've got no medals, but I've been able to use rugby as a mechanism to see places and meet people. You can't possibly have had any idea what you were going to from South Africa, a rugby environment where, you played in high school, the Springboks were your heroes, to then go to America. Like, how did you find that? It's like discovering a new world, isn't it?
Yeah. So the funny thing is, I didn't really know much about American rugby at all. I do remember one clear moment. It was the World Cup, let's see, so would have been like 99 World Cup where the USA, played Fiji or somebody. And this fly off Mike Hooker threw a really good dummy, sliced through, and he scored an excellent try. And then he nailed the sideline conversion. But they still, I think, lost by 1 point or something like that. But either way, I was like, oh, okay, so they play a bit of rugby there. That's great. That was my first real exposure to the US Eagles. Todd Clever was the poster boy for the Sevens at the time, and I remember seeing him a bit here and there. He hated to throw a big dive or smash somebody in the tackle. So his name for sure I knew. And so, but the club rugby scene I didn't know, and I didn't know what the level was like. And so when I played 15s in the US, it was a bit of a mixed bag. But playing sevens in the summer, that was where I fell in love with the sport, because they would travel around to tournaments in California all over, San Diego. We were in Santa Barbara, Las Vegas. We went to an event. So it was so much fun, and there were a lot of good players. Each team had obviously some very good American players, and then a couple of funny talkers. And so that's kind of where you measured yourself. You're like, okay, which funny talkers did they have? A couple of Kiwis, some South Africans. Yeah, so it was a real eye opener, and I really loved sevens from my US stint. Where in South Africa, then the traditional focus was 15s. Once a year, you'd play in a sevens tournament. And while I loved that one tournament a year, it was such a brief, fleeting moment, right? So it kind of like sparked my love for the game of sevens actually coming to the US.
And the Americans love sevens, don't they? Because there's a bit of space. The technicality of the set piece is a bit more reduced, and they're able to use those physical attributes that they've got in abundance.
Absolutely. And you noticed, when Mike Friday took over the US Eagles a role, how, a couple of crossover athletes can make a massive difference in sevens. And also I feel like the world of 15s is so well funded for the bigger nations that it's very tough to compete for some of the emerging nations. And so when you go to Rugby World Cup outside of Japan, that was a remarkable time when Japan did so well. You don't really see a side that is not ranked in the top 10 beating a top 10 side. It doesn't really happen that much. Where in sevens, you have Spain beating New Zealand. You won't have that in 15s in our lifetime, right? So things like that, I think, is so exciting about the game of sevens. And then you're right, like my father-in-law, he's from the Boston area, so he watches sevens for the first time, and he's enthralled. He's loving it because he can understand mostly what's going on. I mean, people just picking up, running, and scoring. With 15s, he's like, I have no idea what you guys are doing. You keep lifting people up, you keep putting the bodies together. When can you pick it up? So sevens is more palatable, and the fact that it's in the Olympic Games is obviously key for growth here in America.
Yeah, I went to play in America, as we were discussing backstage, and it was an amazing thing because I was a kid. I was 20 years old, but I had started playing rugby at 11. So as a rugby player, I was 9 years old. I was playing rugby with guys who were in their late 20s and they'd played for a season, but their enthusiasm was off the chart, like properly ready to absorb everything and anything. I loved that need and desire to learn and improve. You must have found that from the American players.
Yes, 100%. And for them, there was just I suppose they were just so excited that we were all coming over to play rugby here and help grow the game. But as you said, the fact that you have a lot of local people driving the game, and the youth programs actually were surprisingly massive. Like in San Diego, going to visit there, thousands of kids, young girls and boys who are playing rugby, coached by either American folks that their kids were playing, or they were played overseas at some point, or a bunch of foreigners. Like we said, there were a few Australians here, a few South Africans there, a few Kiwis there that have now emigrated and are American citizens and are helping drive the sport. And you're right, I think that is where when World Rugby decided, you know what, we eventually need to bring the Rugby World Cup to America. There are so many youth programs and so many people in the community that love the sport and drive it forward. It really is fantastic. And for me, you're right. I was, player coach, if you will. I played in the backline primarily, obviously in South Africa. And so it was really nice to work with all these young players coming through. And the amazing thing is how quickly they caught on to it. And because they were so fast and had some physical attributes, I'd never really been in the gym much in South Africa. Now, again, that's not a regular South African. That was just me being a English fast talker that would talk my way out of the gym, as opposed to the Afrikaners that would lift anything and everything. So it was really cool to see how they picked up the skills and took to the game so fast.
Now, you're from South Africa. I'm from the Scottish Borders. Both rugby is the number one game in town, because of what's gone before, the traditions, the expectations, the language that you speak, the school that you went to, all of these things that create a perception. You go to America, it's not necessarily a blank sheet, but there isn't maybe the baggage that comes with that. And look at the women's team and women's sport. They don't seem to be impacted by some of the barriers that maybe we have in this country or in South Africa. How refreshing was that for you? Because they wouldn't have had a clue who you were.
Yeah, exactly. And you're so right. So you mentioned some of the names, like they obviously knew the All Blacks. That's the thing. New Zealand was quite well known here, but you're right. People didn't really know a lot of folks in the past. And then some supporters though had watched previous World Cups and knew some things. But again, rugby being fairly new here in the US. But what I found most interesting was the development of the women's game. The women's game was far ahead of any women's rugby that I had seen. And again, I'd only been exposed to the South African women's side of it, which was fairly new. So for me, that was fantastic. So when I came to a rugby practice, it'll be the men's practice and the women's practice going on, before each other, after each other. And I was like, oh, wow, there's a women's team. Almost every team that I joined had an equal counterpart. So that was really fantastic. So, and many times you would co-coach both sides and they would help you would help them and type thing. So I think that was where I knew where the US Eagles had won the Women's World Cup in 91. And I wasn't surprised because of the enthusiasm, the skill set, the drive. Everybody's able to play. I know that growing up in South Africa, I had a couple of friends and even on my mom's side, they were never able to play rugby. It wasn't an option. And so I think that was really exciting and really amazing. But you're right. It pretty much is a clean slate. And this is the funny thing. When you chat to most Americans that are newer to rugby, they first ask, why aren't we number one in the world? And a legitimate question, because in American sports, and I get the US is the top few in the world. So in sevens, the US got there in 2019. The women's team ranked second in the world, the men's team second, but both sides have won titles along the series. But in 15s, I try to explain to them, it is a lot harder. Like, you grow up in another country that loves rugby and you play it when you're 4 years old, 5 years old, like you would American football here or basketball or baseball, all those sports. So they kind of understand that. So I think it'll only take time for them to realize once they watch, like when New Zealand beat the US in the men 104 to 14, they were like, oh, okay, we have a long way to go. And I think we're obviously on that path at the moment.
That was a tough one, and it had some negatives that came out of that. We might get into that. I'm going to tell you a story where I came to America. It made me laugh because I played in the back line. I played at fly half. I wore number 10, and they had a backs meeting one night at Todd Martin's house, and we went to this house, and it had a TV in the corner like a cinema. I'd never seen it before, and there's pizza boxes all over, and the chairs are lined up lecture style, and they have a flip chart, and they're talking about the game and about playing and games that are coming up. And they said, right, we need some plays. We need some backline plays. And they said, Bruce, come forward. So I've got the pen. My mate who was playing in number 8 is sat at the back just eating pizza. Like, here we go. This will be interesting. And I was talking about, if we get to there, let's just expect, so don't have too many calls because we might not have the right people in it. So as long as we're clear. And I gave this lecture as a 20-year-old naive rugby player about playing the game as you see it, and they're kind of nodding away, and they asked some questions, and then I finished and I said, so is there any questions? And I'll never forget Joe Vivenzo puts his hand up and goes, but can you give us some backline plays? they just wanted plays, the guys from Gridiron who it's 4th and down, here's what we call, here's where I run, here's what you do here. Did you find that a challenge, or is that just because I had bored them?
No, you were spot on. So I had two experiences. One is playing, at a club level, but the other is coaching. And coaching, I think that's where it came into play. So I coached at Occidental College. I played for their alumni team, right, type thing. And so, the playing side of things was okay because we had a few foreigners on our side. So, we would draw up some moves, and you're right, the backs love any kind of move you could do. But the better you got, as in we joined Belmont Shore and stuff like that, you would play what you saw in front of you, right? As you said, heads up play, which is more familiar around the world. But coaching at college level, I had 5 or 6 football players that literally joined, and they were huge units. They were so fast. I'll never forget the first training. We're playing touch rugby, so I'm telling them, okay, so you got to be onside. You can't run ahead of the ball type thing. They're like, fine. And the first pass comes to this huge guy, and he literally doesn't even put his hands up. It just freaking hits him in the chest and goes to the ground. I'm like, okay, maybe he wasn't watching. The next guy gets the ball. He tries to catch it. It obviously comes with all these fingers. I'm like, all right, guys, so you have to put your hands up and you got to catch it. It's a massive rugby ball. And they're like, oh, well, we're playing the defensive side. We've never touched the ball. I'm like, oh, okay. Now, not only got to get the game going, but they've never actually touched the ball. So, but you're right. So they were more suited to saying, all right, at this time, at this thing, you're going to go there, and this is your role is going to be like to ruck, or you're going to catch the ball with 2 hands. You're not going to even look to pass, even if there's an 8-man overlap. You just smash it up. And then I was coaching the back, so the backs, you're right. They're like, all right, we need our playbook. And I'm like, okay, I don't have a playbook for you, but I have like, I'll give you 3 moves or 4 moves. And so we did that. So we had actually a flyer from England. So he was good. He was able to, get us downfield and give a couple of passes and stuff like that. But they love their moves. But for me, the whole thing to them, I had to explain to them, why are we doing the move? Because often they just want to do the move. And I'm like, listen, when you caught the ball, there was no one in front of you. The heads up, we said you go and score, but you want to do the move just because that's what you're taught. So it was a fine balance of explaining why you're trying to do something. The whole goal is to score tries, getting over the line and putting it down. So yeah, there were definitely been some funny moments. There was one though, not necessarily about the moves, but about translating from football or another sport to rugby. So I was at the USA Sevens tryouts in San Diego, the Olympic Training Center. It's a beautiful kind of setting, but it's quite rural. There's like some bushes around the fields, and there are rattlesnakes, by the way, in the bushes every now and again. So we had seen one before. One was near our sports bag, so we were a bit anxious about that. But anyway, so this guy, he probably runs 100 meters in like 9 seconds. Okay, so he gets the ball, he rounds everybody, and we're like, wow. Now I'm covering in sevens, I'm covering sweeper, so I'm coming back, and he gets over the line, but he doesn't put the ball down. So it's a tryout, right? So I'm like, okay, well, I have to tackle him. So he's really close to the dead ball line. So I smoke him, and he doesn't know what's going on. He's like, why are you tackling me? But we go into the bushes where the rattlesnakes are. And obviously everyone's like, get the hell out of there. So I help him out of there. And coach comes running over. There's no snakes, and that's all good. But he was like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, you must put the ball down after you get over the line. He's like, okay. So he never made that mistake again. It was Perry Baker, by the way. No, it wasn't. It wasn't before his time. But yeah, so there was quite a bit of that, as you said, to kind of translate and eventually to get the players to realize that rugby is, the reason why it's so amazing is that it's not scripted as much as some of the other sports. Yeah.
Well, the Albany Knickerbockers, where I played in upstate New York, I've seen them. Some of the boys have come over and they've watched games at Murrayfield, and I've meet up with them, and I've been to the States, and some of them say, we still use those moves you gave us, man. We still use them, because they've not had any foreigner input since 2000, and they're still using them. I remember the first game I played, I ran a cut, and the referee gave a penalty against me for obstruction. And I was like, ref, but I gave him the ball, and I'll never forget. He said, "But they bought you, man. They bought you." And I said, "I know that's what they were supposed to do," but I just loved it, and I felt it was quite a refreshing thing to go somewhere where the enthusiasm was huge and the knowledge wasn't corrupted by previous experience, and it was a really nice thing. And you went to play opposition, and the familiarity in the rugby family, that sort of third half, was still so important. Is that still there in America?
Yeah, it is, and I think that probably added to my enjoyment early on. Again, I'm not saying South Africa don't like a party afterwards, for sure. But I think what was so great was there was always a little thing put on for both sides, which is cool. Like you said, it could be pizza, it could be snacks, and a bunch of beers and things like that, which is really great. So that social element was very important. And then with the sevens, that we experienced too, that was really great, because you would go to a tournament and it'd be an all-day tournament, and then all the teams would come together, which is really cool too. So you really got to mix and kind of enjoy that kind of social element. And I suppose even when you get to the professional side of things now with Major League Rugby, they still meet for a meal, which is great. And you may have 1 or 2 beers as opposed to 20 beers back in the day, but you're still coming together and sharing a meal. And I think that tradition is vitally important for the game and the sport, because if you are trying to promote rugby and talk about its values and talk about all the things it brings, you need to live that as well. And so I really do think teams do a good job of that, which is great. And the same thing with the Sevens World Series, when the back-to-back tournaments are done, you see the teams coming together. So I think it is alive and well all over. Look, I can't speak for the international 15-a-side game. That's probably slightly different. But yeah, coming to California, touring around, we certainly got up to no good after a few jars, and trying to lift cars and do the usual thing back in the day,
Sounds a lot like the Scottish borders. You go to Jed Forest and you go to Hoyk. You went to Santa Barbara and San Diego. It's the same. Just you had slightly more hours of daylight.
That's right.
when did you realize I can do pretty well here? I can get to the elite level here. When was there a moment, or what, did someone come up and shoulder tap you and say, do you realize this opportunity is there for you?
Yeah, so it was kind of a cool progression. So I started with that team, the Occidental All Boys, played Division 2 15s for a while. We had some really good players. And then our coach at the time, he realized, well, okay, we're getting better and better, but we kind of need a few more forwards, and in the sevens game we need a couple more backline players as well. So he merged us with the team out of Long Beach, California, called Belmont Shore. Now, Belmont Shore were one of the top teams in the country in the Super League competition, and it was really great because we got our better players got to mix up with their better players, and so we had a really good team in total. And for me, the full circle moment came when I was playing center or fullback, and Mike Herkus was playing fly-off. Herkus was the guy I watched when I was a young South African at the World Cup back in the day, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. This is the guy that played for the US Eagles, was their starting fly-off, and I remember his name. And so he came to me, and it was quite funny because he's like, good luck for the game, this, like it was a big deal. And I come from South Africa, where I was like, we play in front of a lot of people and playing against some big names, and Springbok players were running up opposite you, and they would go on and do great things on the international stage. So, but it was great. It was really good to be amongst those players, and we had a good team. And that year in 2007, we won the national championship. And so it was kind of cool. I got to see, some of the other teams that came, we played during the playoffs, and that was really great. But I necessarily didn't have aspirations to take 15s to the next level. But when I was playing sevens, I felt more at home in the sevens field, being a smaller player that could evade some people. And so that for me was really great, the fact that it's so much sevens. And at the time when I was playing in the summer series, I didn't realize that the US had a competition called the Sweet 16, where the top 16 teams in the country for sevens got together. I knew the 15s did that, and we won one year, and that was great, But so we would play this team called Riverside out of East LA, Southeast LA, and they would beat us in every final of these different tournaments along the way. And they had some brilliant players. A lot of them were Fijian-born players, and more elusive than a politician, that sort of stuff, right? And so, but after every tournament, we're like, wow, we lost by a try or two tries, close one, that sort of thing. Then the next year we play, and this team was really good from San Diego called Ombak, Old Mission Beach, and they've been perennial champions over the years. And we would play them. They had a lot of South Africans too, and they had Todd Clever and a few guys like that. So very exciting finals. We would maybe win one or two, but predominantly they would win by one score. I didn't realize that Riverside for 2 years went to the national championships and was number one in the country. Ombak followed that, and they were number one for a while as well. So eventually we qualified. We realized that if you were the initially was a top one, then became top two sides, you could go to this top 16 tournament. So we went our first year and unbeaten in the pool stages against all these players that were capped US Eagles. I didn't know their names per se, but I remember someone saying, oh, well, they have 4 Eagles, they've got 5 Eagles currently playing on the series, but we didn't know them, so we carried on playing. We did get knocked out in the quarters, but then went up and winning the rest of the day. So we lost one game in the weekend. And so after that, I got a call from the US national coach at the time, Al Caravelli. And I was lucky playing in a good side. I managed to, score a lot of tries and kick some kicks. And so ended up being the top point scorer at the tournament, even though we didn't win. He said to me, listen, Dallen, I want you to come to try out for the USA Sevens team. And I said, wow, Al, that's an amazing honor. But as you can tell, I'm South African, so I'm probably not very much likely not eligible. And he said, well, you've been here for 3 years. You've married an American citizen. You're becoming an American citizen as well. So this is your new home. So, if selected, you could represent the series in 2007. And so I was like, wow, that would be a dream come true. I'd never come close to making the South African seven side. The closest I came was tackling Springbok coach Nick Mallett at a sports awards dinner. It was a pretty big hit, I'll say. But anyway, that didn't get me selected. So I go to this tryout as me and 60 other players from all over the country. And I will say Al Kervely did a really good job of scouting everybody that could be eligible. So we had Taku Ngwenya there, Zimbabwean-born player that we all know then, later would round Brian Abana at a Rugby World Cup. Obviously, Toddy Clever was there, who I recognized him, and a handful of other players. So, eventually 12 of us got a chance to travel to Singapore and Bangkok as like a pre-tour. And wearing the US colors was just very weird, right? Surreal. I mean, I'd only been in America for 3 years. My accent's South African, my heritage is South African, and that sort of stuff. And that's how I identified. But then, in 2007, I got a chance to represent the US in the Sevens World Series. And it was amazing because I kind of got like a second chance, which I always wanted to play international rugby. And sevens was really the game I was after. And so to get that opportunity, I mean, that was a dream come true. I honestly couldn't believe it. I was like pinching myself. Here I am on this world stage, which I've always watched and supported. But to actually play in that arena, it was epic.
And I mean, I love that story, and it's perfect because you went just because you loved it and you were involved and you said yes because you loved it and you were passionate, and then never really knowing what the reward was, and then along it comes and you get the chance. Being able to travel, I lived in Hong Kong for 4 years and was involved in the sevens in various different ways. Never got on the pitch because I'm slower than a fortnight in the jail. But the just being in that environment and seeing that road show of team, you're all in the same hotel. You know the physio from Samoa, and you know the coach from Scotland, and your best mate it plays for Canada, and all those kind of nice little stories and sharing coffees. But it was very much a roadshow. You didn't get to necessarily experience all the places you traveled to. What was it like being in that environment? I mean, picking up on the kind of person you are, I can imagine you being enthusiastic and loving it and pinching yourself probably at times. What was it like being a member of that circus that went from town to town?
Yeah, so it was pretty amazing. So as a, I got a chance to play later in life. So I was about 27 years old when I made my first my debut. And the cool thing was, at that stage, all of us had to have a day job, right? So you had to do something else to support yourself. And I had randomly the South African guy that was my coach, James Walker in LA. He had a computer business, and the computer business had two offices, one in Austin, Texas, and one in LA. So at that time, though, my wife got accepted to do a master's program in theater and fine arts in Austin, Texas. So we moved there, and I called James up and I said, "Hey, listen, I'm in Austin. I know you have a computer business." He's like, "Yeah, you can be a salesperson for me. I'll teach you how to do it." And I was like, "Great." So that was my first job. So I have this rugby-inspired job through my friend over there, and because I know that Carabelli was like saying in the sevens, "Okay, you're going to be for the next 6 months, 2 weeks or 3 weeks every month, you're going to be with us for the sevens. And if you make the team, then you travel type thing. So you come out for a week's training to San Diego, you make the side, you travel for another 2 weeks. So you couldn't really do a real job because you were gone most of the time. And it wasn't, the rugby was paying you $100 a day. So $100 a day is nothing. And you think about it, like when you're competing at the Wellington Sevens in front of 40,000 people, the hot dog vendors are making more than you per day, and you're the entertainment, right? So it was bizarre, but for the time, it was obviously what needed to happen. For me, I was over the moon that somebody sending me a check to play rugby. It was back then. It wasn't direct deposit. You actually got the check, right? So that was firstly surreal. So the fact that you go across and you're put up in a hotel, just to train at the Olympic Training Center. Michael Phelps was there one time we were there. So for me as a young athlete coming through, I just couldn't believe I'm at the US Olympic Training Center in San Diego, Chula Vista. All these other athletes are there. You have all these meals made for you, good facilities, everybody's there. But going on tour, that was a next level experience. World Rugby puts you up in these beautiful hotels around the world. You go to amazing places. My first tour was to Wellington. So I got to go to New Zealand. Which obviously is one of the homes of rugby as well. The Cape Town, the Westpac Stadium. I'd watched the Hurricanes play there. I'd watched Sevens World Series events there. The party atmosphere then at the time before they moved it was like Hong Kong, right? People were there for the party, the dress up. The rugby was just a little sideshow. But it was so great because everything was so professional. You obviously had these team buses. Everything was buttoned down to the minute and to the kind of the setup. Training obviously was as professional as it got. But match day was a different experience. So I've been a fan before in Hong Kong and a few other events, but to run out there, it's a weird feeling because you're there and it's like you almost feel like everyone's on top of you, but they're not. They're in their stadium, but because you're like the spotlight shining on you. So that's where the pressure comes, where everybody's watching you and you're getting in your head and you're like, well, I got to do something, right? As opposed to being pretty calm and collected. So you could tell if somebody is flustered because they'll do something that they won't normally do, But I suppose at the end of the day, you are playing rugby, which is so fun and so amazing. And yes, there's some pressure that comes in here and there. Like we had some early games which we had a lead and then we lost. Those are disappointing. But I tell you, that experience of being on the series, talk about friends. So I had a few friends that played for South Africa. So that was really cool, playing against them, being there on the series. Brilliant players you played against. James O'Connor came through at that time. Israel Dagg for New Zealand. The Honey Badger was there for Australia. So all these names that are young players that you track to, like these players are going somewhere. And then you got to see them represent the 15s game later, which was pretty fantastic. But yeah, it is funny because I'm on the series now a lot, right, for commentary. So I get to experience like the fan side of it. And then the playing side, and then of course now in the broadcasting side. So it's as you said, it's surreal. It still is because you get to see people and like Santi Gomez Cora. I played against him for Argentina, And now 15 years later, he coaches Argentina to win their first championship since when he played. And I was there at both. I was a player when he played against, and then I interviewed him after the final. So we got to share that kind of memory and history and a lot of emotion as well, you know?
I just love the enthusiasm you speak with. Now, I teed you up with this before we came on, before we hit record. I read a thing about you, and I'm so jealous of this. I would love someone to say this about me. Now, I'm not actually sure who it was that said it, but somebody said, "You're an electric dude." How
I love it. I
cool
love
is
it. I
that?
love
And
it.
you are now. I can't. Being Scottish, you can't say dude. You sound like an idiot if you say dude.
Okay. Yes.
But
Yes.
someone calling you an electric dude, I mean, it's coming through your enthusiasm. You almost feel, or I feel, it seems like you can't believe what you've had. You can't
Yes.
believe the experience that you had. You sound like you're very grateful for all of those opportunities.
Absolutely, Bruce. And so, growing up in South Africa, you know, as a young kid, well, I did, and I know a lot of my friends. You dreamt of playing for the Springboks. You dreamt of playing international sport. You dreamt of working in sports, right? Because it wasn't like I remember my dad said to me when I was studying at university. He said, "Dallen, you're so obsessed with rugby. You're so obsessed with sports. If that doesn't happen, you must have something that you could do." And I was like, "Hey, that is good advice. You know, you don't want to just put all your eggs in one basket type thing. So having a backup was always important." But the irony in the whole thing was that I would end up going and have been working in sports full time for 15 years. And my dad obviously couldn't be prouder when he was still alive. He got a chance to listen to me commentate on the Sevens World Series, and he was like, "Darren, I don't know," because he's an accountant. He was like, "I don't know how you are this freelance person that travels the world that is not behind it, like, because he was behind a desk for 50 years and it was very rigid." He goes, I so admire that you're able to take every opportunity. And again, it's not me, it's the sport and the people around it. I am just like so grateful and enthusiastic about it because I still can't believe every time we get to do something you love, that is a dream, right? Most people, have to do something to support their families that they may not choose as their first choice. They fell into it somehow or they were good at it. So I am blessed beyond belief to be able to do something that I would generally, even if you didn't pay me to do, I'd still do it because I love it so much and it's amazing. So that's what I'm saying. When I got paid to play rugby, I was like, someone's giving me a check to do. I love the sport. As a 12-year-old kid running around barefoot in South Africa playing touch rugby, I would play for hours on end. And if somebody said to me, one day you're going to get paid to do this, I'd laugh at them saying, no one's going to pay me to play rugby, right? Or pay me to talk about rugby or, interview people or do some fun stuff like that. So it really is unique. And the fact that rugby takes you places around the world, that I think is Bruce, is one of the best things ever. I'll never forget, I got an opportunity as a 12-year-old kid. My local team, Rondebosch under 13 side, we got a chance to go to Italy and go to international tour as a 12-year-old kid. That memory stuck with me the whole time going, we're playing rugby against other countries that play the same sport, have the same passion for it. We get hosted by these families. My talent was terrible, so I didn't know what was going on there. But I got a chance to see the world from that age. Whereas, when chatting to my wife, she's like, "Oh, we didn't get a chance to travel internationally through." She did field hockey and stuff like that. There was no tours the way she was from, and the fact that to this day, as somebody that's 9 years older than you, that can still travel around through the sport, just using rugby as your passport. Honestly, so grateful, and that's why I'm so excited about it because it's so great. And again, the values of the sport, I think that's the biggest thing I love. So in Los Angeles, when I lived there for a while, I got a chance to work with a nonprofit called Play Rugby USA, which is all about flag rugby for young boys and girls, elementary, middle school, and high school. And the parents that came to watch and got to kind of feel this team sport, they were blown away because a lot of the American sports focus on one-star position, one-star player, and the game is not level. Everybody's not equal on the field. Where rugby, of course, everybody's equal. Everybody's got to pull the flag because we had a non-contact version. The girls are better than the boys because they listen to the instruction. So that confidence builder as well. Oh, it was thrilling to watch. So this program went from 50 kids to 5,000 kids in LA. Unbelievable.
It's not unbelievable because you were
Yeah.
part of it, and you do yourself a disservice saying that it's the game and the people around. There are a whole lot of people who are not doing what you're doing, but you're putting yourself in those positions, and only good guys get those opportunities. And I love you have this. I like to think I have the mentality, say yes, and we'll deal with the repercussions later. Let's go for it. You never know unless you give it a go, and I love that freedom of spirit that you've just said that no, I'm going to go for this and we'll see what happens.
And I think one of the big things, and this is probably where, as a young kid, I got lucky. I always had the belief that everything is going to work out for the right reason, or for end result, that you need to focus on the good part of it. So, for example, like people are like, oh, that's very idealistic. So let's say you like one bad thing happened to me when I was playing. Like I got injured and I broke my thumb, right? So I was out of action for 6 months. So in that situation, that's a good testing one for me to test my own theory. Okay, how do I see the good in this? And the good was, for example, oh, and I can catch up on my reading. Now I can focus a bit more on my homework because I neglected that because I was playing sport time. So focus on all the good things you can do when a bad situation happens. And so don't worry so much. Let's say you really hoped that you got this job, but it didn't come about. That's okay. It doesn't matter. There's more things coming. So I think if you focus more on the positive side of things, which I've been a huge believer since a young kid, good things happen because you're only focusing on the good things. That's not to say you don't work hard, because someone's like, oh, well, you just, you hope you get this. No, I have a vision board. I'd like to be this and this and this, and you keep tweaking things to get better and better. And as a broadcaster, I spent days on end prepping for like a single game to put myself in the best position. But as a philosophy side of things, focus on the positive. Know that good things are happening. Always be friendly and nice to people. Just because you want to be treated that way as well. And you never know. Maybe you make a difference someone's day, or down the line you're so nice to them as well, because you generally are nice, that they return the favor, because you're always looking to help people out. So I feel like you put that out there in the world, it's coming back. At the same way.
Amen. Drop the mic. Drop the mic. And our work here is done.
See you later.
Can we bottle you and then just spread it around? I love it, Dallen. You're an absolute inspiration. Now, I'm a great believer in it. We're products of our environment. There's a bit of nature, but I'm a huge believer in nurture. Who has been your mentors, inspirations, the people that made sure you got it done, picked you up when you fell? I'm guessing I could probably put my finger on a couple of people, but who is it that you thank for getting you to where you are?
Yeah, so my mom and dad, they're just absolute legends. Unfortunately, they aren't here right now. But my mom she got a chance to listen to the Rugby World Cup 2019 when she was still alive, and I gave her a shout out during the Sevens World Series, because so you talk about infectious. My mom is like, bottle it up. She was the most energetic person you've met. She played field hockey for South Africa, like one of their tours. She swam for the Free State region in South Africa when she was younger. She played rugby with the boys, but obviously wasn't allowed to officially. But she smoked some people and some big hits. She has one-liners like you've never seen. She taught Afrikaans for like 30 years. And so she would mix English and Afrikaans together in just a very funny, humorous way. And her biggest move, so you're going to love this. So she meets Todd Clever for the first time. She comes to watch him play in the Sevens World Series. Todd Clever, who's like the poster boy of USA Rugby, huge guy. My mom's like, 5 foot something. She goes up, she goes, Toddy. And he's like, oh, yeah. And this must be Dallen's mom. So my mom goes up for the high five, and Todd's like, yeah. And then she pulls her hand away and says, oh, cramp in my neck. And Todd's just left hanging, just like that. Everyone's dying laughing around. She's like, they go like, I can't believe your mother just freaking shredded Todd Clever. So anyway, so that just kind of like, I suppose, tells you a brief story about like, she's always very funny, very humorous, just a great human being. But through my father and her just being wonderful parents, they really shaped me to do the right thing and try live life to its fullest, but also have the values that go along with it. I think that's kind of probably the biggest message I got from them. They were the best. Then obviously having good friends, and this is kind of like one thing I will say, which is a little bit sad living far away from your home country, is that you do miss out on iconic moments with your best friends growing up. So obviously with the Cape Town Sevens is on, I try to go back every year to see them. But I do feel like, I suppose, and that's the tricky thing, right? I got all these wonderful opportunities and new friends and a lot of brilliant things, but I really miss my high school friends, like guys I know since 11, 10 years old, that we shared so many memories. So I try my best to make, memories with them when I can on different holidays, things like that. But again, they were very grounding and very down to earth. And I think that's kind of those are the best people. And then of course, the last 18 years, my wife has been, the other brilliant not motivating factor, but just somebody that's always around, like, making fun of me and making sure that, I continue to do the right thing in certain situations and stuff like that. So yeah, those people have been amazing.
Your dad's an accountant. He's
Yeah.
worked behind a desk for 50 years, and you
Yeah.
say, "Dad, I'm going to America to play rugby." See you. How does that reaction go down?
So you're so right. So where my mom's like, go and get him, like do anything you want, you know. My dad, you're right. So he was very conservative on the side of things, and so, but at the same time, he knew that, okay. And this, I bet I don't have kids, but I bet the hardest thing as a parent is you know, you've worked so hard to mold and shape your kids to be the best kids they can be, and then eventually they're like, you know, I'm gonna go overseas, or I'm gonna go do this. And so I never forget, there was a very, you know, very emotional time. I said goodbye to my parents at the, and I never made them come to the airport after that, because they would drop me at the airport, and then I was like, guys, you got to go. But then they would come along, and you know, when they're waiting at the gate waving, and you're going up the elevator, and I was like, you know, I'm going for another year. I'm like, it was hard, very hard, you know. But for my dad's side of things, bless him, he knew that I had a marketing and advertising background, and I was using that actually in, like, you know, some of the back then start of social media kind of era. But I told him, listen, I've got a job through the rugby people. I'll be fine. Initially, I was waiting tables, and he wasn't like enthused by that. But I was like, hey, I have to start somewhere. And actually, so this is where the story gets kind of like serendipitous. So the rugby club got me back for a 2-year stint after I'd been there for 6 months, and they said to me, listen, Dallen, there's one of our alumni work at Fox Soccer, and there's a rugby channel. You can go and help and work there, because we know you're interested in broadcasting or media or something like that, and you can go and help, and we'll give you a 2-year visa to work for that company. So I was over the moon. Told my dad. He was like, oh, this is the best thing ever. You're going to be working a big time job. So I get the visa and everything, and the day I arrive in America at LAX airport, I get there and I call the rugby club, and guys, I'm finally made it. I'm here. Let's get going. I get a real job, and they're like, Dallen, great news. You're here for 2 years. This is going to be fantastic. Bad news. We don't have a job for you anymore. Soccer has bought out the rugby channel. So that job is not. So now I'm like, oh God, what am I going to do? So they're like, well, you know, we know you know, we got to give you some cash in hand money. You can go work at a restaurant. I'm like, oh, I just did the restaurant thing for like a year. But how funny is this? The rugby coach I had, James Walker, his twin brother, Peter Walker, was one of the owners of the only South African bar in LA called the Springbok Bar and Grill. So the very first day I go there, and the person I meet up with there, I'm like, hi, Verity, I'm Dallen. You got to train me how to do the stuff here to work in the restaurant. And that was my wife to be. She didn't know at the time. She had a boyfriend, but I told my sister, I think I've met my wife to be. So anyway, that's a side story, Bruce. But it like how funny and serendipitous everything works out in the end. It type vibe. And so, yeah, so my dad eventually was like, yeah, fine. As long as you got a job, you're supporting yourself. And then when I started getting involved in rugby, like professionally and getting paid to work in as a player, and then eventually in media, he couldn't be prouder, couldn't be more thrilled. And obviously, like they loved their rugby. So when they tuned the Sevens World Series and they got to hear their son calling games, South African games as well, for them, I assume they must have been. They got a lot of calls from their friends and family saying, "Well, it's so cool to hear you know your son throwing in a one-liner or two."
I love it. I absolutely love it. Being a waiter in LA, you must have been with some future movie stars, were you not? Is that what movie stars do as well?
Exactly. Well, listen, if only I could recognize people, you know, like often I walk past someone in the mist, like, oh, those, okay, not like Bruce Willis, that I could recognize him, but like, you know, the other actors that are not as well known. Yeah, I've come across a few in my time, but forgot it was them, you know.
Forgot it was them. I love it. And then when did rugby playing become sort of old news? When did you decide? Because that's always a difficult decision.
Yeah, so because I started later, you know, wasn't eligible and didn't know I could play for another country. I started at 27, which is quite, you know, late, particularly in the Sevens World Series. So when I got about 29 years old, you know, there were obviously a lot of younger foster players coming through and stuff like that. So the coach pulled me aside and said, okay, listen, you know, I'm going to take you to the Rugby World Cup Sevens in Dubai. But after that, I'm going to get some of the younger guys coming through. There was a really good player, Shalom Sinuyula, 23 years of age, brilliant stepper. So I helped kind of, you know, train up just in some of the moves and some of the experience I had, at least to pass on to these young guys coming through. But I mean, for me, I was like, wow, I got a chance to play for 3 years in the series. And then it was interesting because the US, by the way, we're not at the core team. So we got invited to 4 tournaments the first year I played, and we did really well. We had a guy called Chris Wiles who'd go on to be a legend in the Premiership in England for Saracens, obviously US Eagles, over 50 caps. And then we were invited to 6 tournaments the following year. And then the next year we became a core team in my final year. So it was kind of like really fitting and fantastic to go out on that high, knowing that the US was a core team. We qualified for the Sevens World Cup, played in it, and so it was in a brilliant position. And so then it was an easy segue for me to then work in media straight after that, because I would always interview people, with a little flip camera back in the day. I'd use my flip flop as a microphone, but then eventually US Rugby was like, "We'll give you a proper microphone. You can do this for real." So I that's how I merged into then a media kind of role type thing. Even if it was only for a few tours, and I got to go to the Sevens World Cup in Russia with that, and a few of the other Sevens World Series events. And that's kind of where I kind of fell in love with, okay, I can use my marketing and advertising background and degree like my father said I should get, and kind of put that into a work sense,
And when you watch, I love Sevens is so exciting, and there's lots to call, and you've got time as someone sprints away to throw in that one line and to get excited, and your enthusiasm is just infectious and makes watching so much more enjoyable. Do you watch as a supporter? Do you watch as a professional commentator? Is it a mixture of both? There must be moments where you lose yourself. There must be moments where you're trying to think of something because there's nothing going on. As a coach, sometimes I still feel I'm a player, a move when there should be something happens, and I go on my tiptoes when it's a line out as if that's going to help them catch the ball. Do you watch like that?
I suppose, yeah. So are you saying when I'm commentating?
Yeah.
Or yeah. So yeah, when I'm commentating, it's kind of like a weird position to be in terms of. So obviously, as a broadcaster, you're always impartial. So it doesn't really matter if USA is playing South Africa. It's kind of funny because South Africa is my country of birth, and I was there for 25 years. But the rest of my life I've been in America, and I played for the US Eagles. But it doesn't really matter to me. This is the best part of who wins, because I'm calling it, or I am just a general enthusiast of the game, as you said. So I suppose more of a fan, and so like. A fan commentating is always going to highlight, obviously, what's going on, which is, I think, the best position to be in. Because I've heard some commentators in Australia back in the day, they were quite Australian-based. And I understand the game's being shown in Australia, but generally the rest of the world's watching as well, and the other team is playing too. So I never was a fan of that. So it's always, for me, it's always like, I just get so excited because the game is so exciting. And that's why Sevens is so cool to commentate. And 15s, yeah, I like doing 15s as well. But, it takes a while to build up to some of the highlights, I suppose, where Sevens is so easy to get you excited. And you're right, there's a bit more time to throw in a bit of flair. Plus the game, I feel like you'd say it's funner because more colorful, because it really is. Their fans are going wild and they're having a good time in the stands, and so is the action. But yeah, there've been times where something has happened and I'm like, I don't quite have the words to describe it, which is not ideal. Like I wish I'd, had been a proper English major and like had all these different ways to say the same thing, right? Which is why you see more and more journalists coming into the lead voice, because in the commentary world, generally three positions, your lead commentator and your analyst / second voice, who almost always is a former international player. But not always does your lead voice have to be an international player. It just happens to be that I have experience in the series, which is why when I long ago chatted to World Rugby, they wanted to bring me on because they wanted more ex-players involved, which kind of makes sense. They also wanted somebody that knew the American landscape pretty well and had a South African accent. So talk about ticking boxes.
So in other words, they just wanted you.
So it worked out. Like it's a perfect combination of what they needed at the time. Because again, South Africa being one of the top tier teams in the Sevens World Series. But yeah, so generally when I'm commentating, whether it's even 15s or Major League Rugby, I'm a massive fan of the game, particularly when something goes really well. Then it's easy to bring that enthusiastic tone because I generally am excited about it. It's kind of funny because it's like I was thinking the other day, like the other jobs you do are, whatever it is, you do a regular job and it might be fairly similar, or some of the circumstances change. Where being a sports commentator, particularly a rugby commentator, there's going to be action and you're not making it up. There's going to be an upset. And if there's no upset, well, there's just a lot of good plays, good tackles, good runs, good movement. So it's kind of like it's a thrilling thing to be involved in because you really are in the center of the game, and the game is enthralling.
Who do you love to see? Is it Perry Baker streaking away? Is it Charlotte Caslick playing for Aussie and carving things up and control? Who gets you off your seat?
So I like when the team that's not meant to win wins. That's a real thrill because it's like life, right? It's like You want somebody that has put in the hard work, and not to say the other team hasn't put in the hard work, but has overcome the odds, and in a traditional sense, has people didn't necessarily think it would happen, and it does happen. I think those are the kind of the real stories that you love to see. So Ireland in the women's side have been fantastic this season, and I called a couple of times when they knocked teams out in the quarters and the semis, and they got their first ever cup final. Like that was thrilling. Like obviously, as you said, you're impartial, but like I was hoping they would win because they've never won before. And that's the kind of thing. It's not that I was not supporting Australia in the final. They had brilliant players and they ended up winning in the end. But you kind of want those highlights to happen. So, the Irish men's side making their first cup final, like that was just glorious. I love Fiji. Fiji have played the most exciting rugby. It's very hard to commentate because the ball gets shifted across every 1 second. A new player has the ball. So that would say it's tough to announce. But you want those upsets. You want those star players to come through as well. Obviously, Perry Baker and Alona Mar, those US Eagles carving up. That's lovely to watch and so amazing for the American fans as well. But anytime there is an upset on the cards or a big moment, even if it's at the expense, of my two countries that I'm members of, to me it doesn't matter because I'm not worried to per se who's going to win the tournament, that sort of stuff. But for example, the series coming up, I'll put this on record. Argentina to win the series would be amazing. What a story, because they've never won the HSBC World Rugby Sevens Series, and I'd love to see that and have been a part of that for the whole year. Australia too. Australia are like right up there as well. But the reason why I love the Argentine story is because I have personal connections with Santiago Moscora as a friend and former player, going against him and his teammates and stuff like that, and met his son type thing. So you have these connections in the sport that you mentioned that has you rooting for them just if they do well. Amazing. If they don't, then of course it's another team's chance to shine.
It must be. I don't know if you've ever thought like this, but it must be quite an honor to be the soundtrack to some of these things that are going to be monumental in that person's life. It's a passing comment for you in the job that you do, and you pass however many comments in the course of a series, but that one time that player scores the try, that's the YouTube clip they're going to share with their grandkids. Or, do you ever think in that big terms, or are you just doing what's in front of you?
Yeah, so you do what's in front of you, but I have a side story there. So when I was playing, my last name is Stanford, which is there's a famous college in the US called Stanford. It's quite an easy name per se. If you look at the Polynesian names, and they're very tongue twisting. So I was called 3 different names when I played, I'm like, how do you mess that up? So Stanford became Staniforth. It became Stanford and something else along the line. Now, my first name should be hard. Dallen, which is, my parents mix their names together, David and Helen. So the DA from David and the Lynn from Helen. So that is harder. Dallen, sure. Dalen, maybe, but Stanford? So I remember.
So your parents were doing Brangelina long before Brangelina. I love it.
A long time ago. Now, my sister tells the story where she's like pissed about it because she's like, her name was Melissa. So she just got a regular name where at least mine was mixed together. So I have that joke with her. I should about that. But yeah, so I remember commentary when I first became into broadcasting. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to get everyone's name right, but I'm going to try my best to get as many correct as possible. If I can speak to the players themselves, the management, the coach, so I can at least get, my biggest thing is saying the names correctly, because I know what it's like as a player. You've got this 1 or 2 cool moments in your career, but somebody called you the wrong name. Not ideal, right? Or they didn't say your name at all. You're like, hey, I just did that thing and you didn't say it. Come on, I won't get that chance again. So particularly on my bio sheets, and we all do it as broadcasters. If somebody hasn't scored a try yet, like let's say on the series or internationally, it's like there's a highlight next to their name. So when they do score, you make a big moment about it, what a special occasion is for their family and friends. Because I know that I would love that if it happened to me as well. So there are certain moments or a milestone, someone scoring their 100th try or something like that. Not saying you prepare a line for it, but you're aware of the milestone coming, so you're able to, on the spot, give it the recognition it deserves as well. But just to your point about, when you're in the moment, you're not thinking about the future, obviously. But there was a time in South Africa, I was there for the Cape Town Sevens, and there was an advert on TV, and I heard my voice, and I'm like, hold on, what the hell is this? No one told me about it. So one of my lines, he's more dangerous than climate change, was on a South African TV ad for SuperSport. And I'm like, well, firstly, surely, they're not going to reach out and let you know, hey, you're on this. But my friends obviously told me later they'd recorded for me. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. So yes, you do hear your voice every now and again. Sometimes takes you by surprise. But yeah, that's an honor. It's an absolute honor if you are selected, or at least you're on someone's couple of highlight clips. That's really fun,
Yeah, it's so cool. I just love it. If you were to, in your time machine, go back and there's 16-year-old Dallen in South Africa, what would you say to him?
Well, so I mean, the great thing is, like I said to you, in terms of having a positive outlook in life and having that as a young age. And again, I can't quite remember pinpoint how or where that came about, because even with my mom's, she would be the Afrikaans teacher, as I said, and she would do a lot of, like, every year she had to mark all the papers, but that stressed her out. And I said to her, I said, listen, and this is so funny because I'm like, as a young kid, trying to tell my mom something. I'm like, okay, so you've done it every year. She goes, yes. I go, have you handed it in on time every year? She goes, yes. And she goes, well, I even get told by my other professors that I do the best job there is. I go, okay, so you've got the experience of doing it well. You should never be stressed about doing it again because you've already done it. It's something. So she was like, oh, I kind of understand, but I don't know if I'll be able to finish. I go, yeah, but you say that every year and you do finish, and you do an amazing job. So why not take the stress out, right? Because then you're living it twice. You're living the stress of, like, it going through, and then you live it again later. So anyway, so with that in mind, telling my 16-year-old self, it'll just be like, you're on the right track. Keep bringing positive energy out in the world. Keep living life to the best that you can, and take every opportunity that comes your way, because you never know if that opportunity won't come again. And so yeah, so I honestly, as I keep saying, so lucky with the amazing people around me. But again, the sport that allows you to do what you do, and then people enjoying it, because that's the thing. If I was broadcasting and someone's like, what, I don't like this commentator and doesn't support the person, then that would have stopped my career. So thankful to all the people that have enjoyed the broadcasting as well in recent times.
I love it. I say that to my wife often when she's stressing about things. That you did it last
Yeah.
year. You've done
Yeah,
it before. You'll be
exactly.
fine. And you always do an amazing job. So just get on with it.
Well, by the way, my wife tells me to stop commentating every move that she makes, by the way. And I'm like, hey, I'm a commentator. And so she does laugh. She's like, okay, fair enough. You can practice a bit more.
Yeah, I'm not one of your rugby players. Let me make dinner without you commentating. Thank you. Yeah,
Brilliant.
I love it. And you're also a podcaster, which is just another mechanism, I think, for you to communicate your love for the game and to connect with people. Here we go. You ready for the pun? You must get a huge buzz out of your podcast.
I certainly do. Thank you for the plug and that. And like you said, the same as what you do. You chat to people that you're interested in, or you enjoy what they do. The exact same thing. So during the pandemic, Robin McDowell, a player I played against, he played for Canada Sevens. We went head to head, and he just called me up at the blue, and he said, Dallen, he says, would you be interested in us doing a podcast together, and in North America? And I was like, that's a great idea. And I've been asked to do one long ago, but the timing wasn't right and I wasn't interested. But with him being a coach, and he's got a lot of great connections as well, it's kind of awesome. We've got to chat to some of our favorite women and men 7s and 15s players and coaches over the years, and sporadically we put it out. It's called the Rugby Hive, as you said. So hopefully folks are buzzing to go to it, the social media, and check it out. There we go. And it's just fun, right? Because it's like you get to chat and chinwag and ask these stories, and particularly someone like players who are their favorite sevens players of all time, or 50s players, or any backstories, like Brian Abana telling us a story when he was a young kid. Francois Pinault gave him a rugby jersey that inspired him to carry on going. Like, really cool stuff, that you kind of get to find out. So yeah, Rugby Hive is what it's called. And like you, I just love chin wagging and having a good time with the guests,
And you've done so much. We've hardly even touched the surface, scratched the surface, I think, and I love talking to you. You mentioned it earlier, and I did want to ask you about this. So you're not a teacher, you're a coach in some respect through the experience you've had, but you said it earlier, you went from 50 kids to 5,000 kids, and you'll belittle your role in that, I think, probably because you're a humble man, but that opportunity to get involved in something and to create an environment that people want to be part of, and then you can get to the cultural part of the values that you've mentioned. How important do you think that is in American society? Because it's kind of just what happens in South Africa. It's kind of just what happens in the Scottish borders and in the valleys of Wales and in New Zealand. And how important do you think that role is in America at the moment?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question and a good point you bring up. I remember being involved in it and being so excited about it because it was touching the lives of so many people. All those kids, had one or two parents or grandparents that would come and support them or be involved in their lives. And I kind of felt that the American society, and again, most societies have obviously, huge amount of issues around. And so sport has a way of bringing people together. It also has a way of, I suppose, helping young people become better, and that's the great thing of what it provided. So one of the first things I did was I found the people I trusted in the community, young college kids, men and women that I could see were of good nature, good value, could be good role models for these young kids, and that I think was vital. So found these great people. Train them up, send them out into the communities, and they would be these mentors slash coaches of these young kids. And it was so great because part of my job then was, instead of me actually coaching the kids directly, I would then work with the mentors. But I'd go to these different locations in Los Angeles, and I would see how these young kids looked up to their coach, to their mentor, and that was very special. And the fact that there was a sport design that they didn't know. This is the cool thing. If it was like, hey, we're gonna do basketball, I was like, oh, I know basketball, I'm not good at it or whatever. Everyone's like, rugby, and they were like, you mad? And I'm like, what do you mean you mad? They're like, oh, that's dangerous. I'm like, no, we're gonna do flag rugby. And then someone comes to me and they go, you're not from South Africa. I'm gonna go, I am from South Africa. You can't hear my accent. It goes, no, you're not, because you're not black. And I go, oh no, there are white South Africans too. And they're like, oh, and I'm like, listen, I go, the beautiful thing of what we talk about here is now you need to go back and look at South Africa and tell me a bit more about South Africa as a country and society. And they're like, oh, great. And then they came back and they're like, Nelson Mandela was your president. I go, yes. And he helped bring people together who might not have just agreed on things because of the sport of rugby. And they were blown away. They're like, and we're playing rugby now? I go, exactly. And now we're going to go play against all these other schools from different walks of life and different societies. So the whole goal of the program was then to bring all these kids together, which was amazing. So you got these kids from Malibu, and then you got these kids from East LA, everyone playing the same game against each other. And the main thing I think for us was, as you said, society-wise, is helping the parents and helping the other staff at the school understand that while this is a game, the most important part is not the winning and losing. That's irrelevant. It's how we bring ourselves together, and how we react after a loss is very important. How we react after a win is very important, and how we can lift each other up, knowing that you've got the next task at hand, which mimics life. So you're so right. Society here needs it, especially to also for the young kids to have confidence, to know that there's more to life than winning and losing per se, but it's about being a good person, being a good teammate, and helping each other out. We could use that in every country in this world, particularly in the US. And I know that when I do move back to California with my wife, and maybe at the end of the year or next year, that's a project I'm gonna get right back into, because I think that's key. I saw it firsthand with the young kids, and the parents particularly would come to me afterwards and say, oh, now I understand what you're trying to do here with this program type thing. And again, it's all because rugby is a sport that can lend itself to showcase those values.
And another mic drop moment. Right, I'm going to try and keep this to 2 questions, but who knows? What's the future then for rugby in America? Because there will still be towns and cities and neighborhoods you could walk into. Dallen Stanford, the voice of rugby in America, US Eagle, and they won't have a clue who you are or what rugby is or where they can access it. There's a World Cup coming that is amazing. I want to be there. I've got to be there. But there will still be Americans oblivious to all those things you've just said that program is able to provide. What is the future for American rugby in the next, 5, 10, 15 years?
Yeah, so look, firstly, it's amazing that the US has awarded the World Cup, and I love that it's quite early. So you're right, it's a good 8-year pathway up until the Men's World Cup and then the Women's World Cup following after that. So look, a couple things. I think on the competitive side of things, if you track back how Japan were really successful at their World Cup in 2019 on the playing side of things, they had their top league going for like 15 years or so, and they had a good mix of foreign players to help elevate their local game with their players as well, which Major League Rugby is doing as well. So we're in year 5 now, so add another 8, so it'd be about 13 years Major League Rugby would have had a proper decent runway. And who knows, 12 American cities right now, one Canadian city. The areas get expanded where MLR plays. So I think it's important to have a good on-field product for the men's game. The women's game is in a good place as well. A lot of the women's Eagles are playing in the UK and doing really well, which is fantastic to see amongst the best players in the world there. But I think it's important in each community. Like I said, in San Diego, like was a hotbed. In Texas, when I lived there was so much rugby going on. It's the local people that aren't, they're just coaching the young kids. Because let's be fair, a kid that plays in the World Cup, when the US hosts, could currently be, 12 years old, type thing. So you never know where these players come from, but they grow the game at the grassroots level and not focusing on the national team. They focus on just spreading the love of the game, and having fun and doing something proactive and something, active as well. I think that's a very big thing about the US. We need people to be a bit more active as well. But the future of the game, I think the great thing is we're going to have more sponsors locked in now that we have a real World Cup to aim for. And that was one thing I always felt was missing in the American game was, well, we have these American sponsors that sponsor the All Blacks and involve other sports, but don't really get involved in rugby. And again, finances unlock many things that are needed in the game to spread the game. The other thing is TV. Having rugby on television here in the US is huge. So the fact that the sevens is now being broadcast a bit more, the 15s and Major League Rugby is being shown so people can get to see what's going on is huge. Olympic Games, I don't want to discount that. The US needs to medal at the next Olympic Games. So the men or women medal, and all of a sudden you will have millions of Americans tuning in going, what's that? And hey, that plays interesting. What a great story they have. They've defeated all the odds, and here they are winning a medal for our country. So yeah, I think the future is bright. The future is as bright as it's ever been. I've been here now for almost 20 years, and this is the most exciting time period we're living in now. It is the next decade. I can't wait to host you, Bruce. We'll sing some cold jars. We're gonna have a brilliant time. We'll follow the Scottish team around as well. It's gonna be epic. There's so many good moments to come. So as I said, the best is yet to come.
Dallen, people have made hollow requests like that before, and I've taken them up on it. So be very careful. Be very careful.
No, listen. I love the Scots. I love sinking a couple of cold jars, and of course, I love my rugby. So this is an honest invitation. We'll make our like a touring group. We'll be like, these are the games they're going to, and we'll sort it out.
I'm in. Yeah. Well, you look after Jordan Edmonds. On the next time you call a try by Jordan Edmonds, you can say that's all thanks to Bruce Aitchison's coaching. Okay, so there you go.
Really?
I'll give you that one. I'll give you that one, right? So I'm listening. When Junior scores, he's known as Junior. Yes. When Junior scores, I'm taking all the plaudits for that. I would love to talk to you about Major League, but otherwise we're going to be here for hours, so that I'm going to make a date, and I need you to come back because the Major League thing fascinates me, and there's superstars coming in, and there's all sorts going on. That's for another day. And there's the development of the game, and you're Dallen, I've absolutely loved this. Has been such an enjoyable more than an hour, and I love it. I did say to you before you started I was going to ask you one final question, and I'm intrigued as to where this is going to go. So Dallen, for you, happiness is?
Well, firstly, before I answer that, you did tell me earlier on, but then we just carried on chatting, so I didn't really think about it too much. Okay, but let's go. Okay, tee it up again. Happiness is?
Finish the sentence. Happiness is?
A cold jar with sleek, sensational rugby friends.
I need some sleek, sensational rugby friends. I don't think it's me. I don't think I'm sleek particularly.
Well,
but I like it.
Your hair is sleek. Your hair is sleek. And from this chat, I know you're a sensational human. So you've got it all. You've got what it takes. You've got to put it together.
Shucks, you're killing me, man. Dallen, go out in the world and do what you do. I would like everybody to be a little bit more Dallen. I think I'm gonna make a hashtag. Be more Dallen.
Bruce, thank you so much for everything you do, pal. As I said, I felt like I know you from seeing you on social media for so many years. So I'm so glad we finally got to connect. Yeah. And I'm dead serious. When you do come to America, let's not wait until the Rugby World Cup. Maybe we see each other in Paris for the Rugby World Cup coming up next. That would be fantastic.
Deal. I'm sold. Thank you, my man. All the very best. See you soon. I love that guy. He is worth his weight, and he is going out and he's making it happen. He's talking positively, spreading the gospel, and when people spread the gospel, others tend to follow. I think the world is a better place for Dallen Stanford. If you've enjoyed it, you can catch us on Apple, Acast, and Spotify. Tell your friends, please leave a review. Remember, be nice. And you can also watch on Facebook and YouTube. There's going to be more. We're going to have him back because that is just too good to only taste once. He is magnificent. I'm beginning to think my happiness might be Dallen Stanford. My name is Bruce Aitchison from the Happiness Is podcast. And for the moment, my happiness is still egg-shaped. I look forward to speaking to you all again very, very soon.